Hi guys, Craig Stocker here. My problem of practice was how do I incorporate video analysis inside of a weight room without taking up too much time in the class and without neglecting the rest of the class while that's happening. In years past, I will use video analysis when we're learning new technique or when we're trying to help a student out that is struggling a little bit with the movement. And I'll use the app Coach's Eye, and I'll take my tablet, I'll film the kids, and then we'll break down what they're doing right and wrong and see if we can fix some of the issues they have. The downside with that is that it's pretty time intensive. For me to film the movement, then for me to break it down with them, it could be upwards to 5 or 6 minutes with just that one student. It doesn't seem like a lot of time, but with a class of 45 kids and only a 45-minute period maximum, you don't get to actually see and interact with a lot of kids throughout that period. And then during that 5 minutes while you're working with that one specific student, the rest of the class is kind of being neglected. So the idea I had and came up with was I had the students first break off into groups of 3. I tried groups a little bit smaller and groups a little bit bigger, and it didn't really work. So groups of 3, and one student brought a device of their choice. Most of them brought their cell phones. And I only had one student bring their cell phone because I didn't want the others to be playing with social media or checking their text messages or getting distracted during that process. So only having one student with a cell phone worked out really good because that phone was actually being used constantly throughout the entire period. Then they took turns. The student would perform a movement. They would get videotaped, and the other 2 members would help them critique what they're doing right or wrong. Now, the hard part about this is that the students, they don't have the greatest knowledge base, I guess you could say, in terms of technique and movement patterns. So what I did was each group was breaking down by similar deficiencies. So let's take, for example, we were filming an air squat and all the students had a problem staying on their heels. Then they all had similar issues that they could look at. So no matter which student was actually performing the movement, they were actually looking at a similar deficiency and a movement fault. I also had cues written up on the board for them so they could see exactly what we were looking for. So a list of things that we want to look for A, we want to look for B, we want to look for C, and so on down the list that they could kind of just use as a checklist. This worked out really good because not only did it help those students that were actually performing the movements, but it also gave the students that were help critiquing them a little bit more of a knowledge base to go off of. So now it kind of helped them move forward as well. I'm a firm believer inside the weight room that if they can see somebody else doing something wrong and they can help coach that other person up, it's only going to help make their movement patterns that much better. This is a pretty transformational process just because we're getting the students a lot more involved inside the weight room. At times, the most important thing is that I want my students to be able to perform all the movements we're doing inside the weight room safely and effectively. And when they leave class, they can go to any facility in the country and perform these movements again. And I know they're going to be safe and they're going to be able to get something out of the movement. But now we get to take it to a step further. Now it's more about, can we perform this movement even more technically sound? So now we're still safe. Now we're going to be effective. Now we're going to get even more of the benefits out of the movement because we're technically exactly where we need to be. It was also great because the students got to really work with each other. It was great to see students that maybe were not close friends and they might not have a great conversation anytime before, during, or after class, but now they were almost being forced to work together, and it went really great. The kids were given a lot of good feedback. Since we had that checklist on the board, it was pretty simple that Hey, did they do this? No, you didn't do this. Hey, look at this video. You weren't doing this. Let's try this. I was worried at times that it was going to be borderline malicious, that it was going to be something that having another student critique another student was going to be an issue, but it actually never hit that at all. I didn't have any negative problems with students correcting other students' technique. This will absolutely make a difference. I've been using video analysis with students and strength training for years and years now, but it's been very sporadic. Like I said before, since it is so time intensive, it's pretty tough to use it on a regular basis just because so many kids are getting neglected. I used to only really use it when kids were really struggling. If I had a student that just my verbal cues, my visual cues, using other students' visual cues, when that really just wasn't hitting home, we'd pull that tablet out, we'd film them, and then we'd kind of break that down. And it always seemed to help, but the risk to reward was we lose a lot of time with the rest of the class. My ultimate goal is, I call it a touch, and I want to get in contact with every one of my students at some point through the entire class. And taking up 5 or 6 minutes with one student makes it almost impossible to get to everybody. So now I'm going to be able to incorporate this process with classes down the road. Having the students use their own cell phones worked out great. They were able to use the devices easily. The app they downloaded was free, and Coach's Eye is extremely easy to use. It's just push a button to record, and then now it's just drag a scroll, and you can forward, backward, and slow it down, and it's very simple to use. So the students were very comfortable using those devices. So hopefully this will be something that I continue to use throughout the year and will continue to use in the future. I would like to get to the point where this can be something that is used through all of our strength classes. I have 5. Our class offers 16. So we have 16 different strength classes throughout the school, throughout 2 per period. I can only teach 5 of them. So those other 11 classes, my goal is to get the other teachers on board and they can start using this process as well. And hopefully this can be something to improve their classes, movement patterns, and technique too. I also think the students really enjoyed this process. Students love technology. 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, they live on their phones, they live on devices. So incorporating that into a weight room, I think they really enjoyed. I've always had a no cell phone policy in my weight rooms that they don't even bring technology in at all. So having them have those in there was a little bit of a struggle for me at first. But the students seem to really enjoy it, and I think they're going to get a little bit out of it. The student also that brought their cell phone in, they now have that video of themselves performing that movement. So that was something that I might try to play with in the future and see if I can fix. If I can get every student to record on their own cell phone, that way they always have that and they can always reference it and go back to it and see a side-by-side comparison of good and bad things they did. The downside, though, is a lot more devices in the room, a lot more devices going on. In our group of 3, one student was recording, one student was performing, and another student is resting, waiting to critique. I always worry about that student that's resting is now they're on their cell phone, they're playing with it, they're going on social media, they're texting, and now it's just a distraction, and now they're checked out of the lesson. So I'm going to experiment with that in the future and see if having more devices leads to something better in the future. But overall, this was a very successful process that I will definitely be doing again and looking forward to seeing the benefits the kids have in the future. Thanks, guys.